Greetings and salutations, my dear audience. This is Joe St. Egg Benedictus coming at you with another odd Bible review. I want to give a shout out to my pal Mike, to all the visionaries and mystics out there. Thank you for joining me. You do not have to adjust your camera. This is very blurry because this particular Bible comes with this clear cover. This is the Harper's Standardized Study Bible, New Testament, Red Letter Edition. Okay, so the first order of business is, first of all, welcome back to the channel. I'm sure that it's been a while since I made a video, and I'm thankful for all of you who tuned in and are tuning in. Close to 1,000 subs, so let's get there. Like and subscribe and all that. But the first thought that you might have is the first thought that I had, which is that this is some version of the original Harper's Study Bible by Howard Lindsell. And when I bought this, that's what it was, what I thought it was. But then I started to look, and I see here that this is a translation from the original Greek by Larry D. Harper. So I get into it, and I think, who is this Larry D. Harper fellow? First of all, we got copyrights of 2015 and 2020, and I know by that point that I'm working with something other than a mainstream Bible translation because, one, it's recent. I mean, for some of us, we started our YouTube channels around 2016, 2017, and certainly had YouTube channels pick up around 2020 because that's when COVID broke out, and a lot of us really dug in deep with our channel. So knowing all of this, I thought, okay, what is going on here, and what kind of translation is this? Well, started to read the forward about this Larry D. Harper Study Bible, and the first paragraph is quite a whopper. So let me get my pencil and let's see, what pencil should I use here? Let's see, pencil. Let's see, nope. USA Titanium. Okay, and I want to read the paragraph and kind of give you a feel of what kind of translation or translator we're working with. Here goes. The translation of the biblical text in Harper's Standardized Study Bible is the work of Larry D. Harper, an individual who has worked on it for more than 40 years under the conviction that every available translation of the biblical text, now notice every available translation of the biblical text, has been produced with the misguided notion that the Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek words in which the Bible was written can be bent to mean whatever the translator or the translation committee decide they mean in the various contexts in which they occur. So you read that paragraph, and your first thought is, wow, this is quite a outspoken, perhaps arrogant person, or at least somebody who's very confident in their translation. Well, we'll get there. Anyhow, so it gives you, first of all, the introduction to the translator, then the translator's preface, in which this person, by the way, just to let you know that we're dealing with somebody who's not necessarily just a fly on the wall, Larry D. Harper. He has degrees from Trinity Evangelical Seminary and was in a PhD program for Near Eastern Studies at Berkeley, University of California. So he knows his languages, and he's quite adept at Aramaic, cuneiform, and ancient languages. So he's not working outside of the mainstream when it comes to particular translation philosophy. In fact, you can see here he describes the difference between formal and dynamic equivalence, gives some examples. But let me go ahead and give you the format before I get too much into the rest of the theology. Here is kind of how it's laid out. Double column with notes in the middle. I like that. When I picked this up, I thought, hey, you know what? It's worth the price for $3. I don't know the translation. Again, I thought I was working with the Harper Study Bible, which came out in the late 60s and then revised again in 1985 by Howard Lindsell. But when I started to read it, I thought, it's a little different translation. Abraham engendered Isaac, and Isaac engendered Jacob. This is the book about the origin of Jesus, the anointed one. And I thought, well, maybe it's just a paraphrase or a really loose translation, but Larry D. Harper insists this is really wooden as you can get. Here's His Majesty via the prophet would be fulfilled. Guess what? That's his take on behold. So he does change it to be a little bit more up to date. He talks a little bit about using archaic language and changing archaic language, as well as making sure that participles are interpreted as participles and not as verbs, things like that. Red letter edition, by the way. So I'm thinking about this translation. I thought, well, maybe I can use it for Bible study or for one of my small groups. And it is really kind of wooden to the point where it really is not something I could teach out of, especially if people are in the NIV or the NRSV. Like for instance, if I were to read this in a small group, you have heard that the ancients were told, you cannot murder. And whoever it might be, murderer is be held accountable. But I tell you that anyone who becomes angry with his brother, I do want to get onto this. I was thinking about this today when I was reading his work. And let's see. Whoever it might be that he's called him stupid will be held accountable for sentencing to the trash pit of fire. That's Matthew 5, verse 22. I want you to remember that Jesus gives us very specific instructions not to criticize, or, well, I don't want to say criticize, but because you can be constructive, not to call names. So think about that. But what really starts to heat up is when we get out of the Gospels and get into the letters. I want you to check out this, how he does the letters. There you go. So here's 1 Corinthians 10. He breaks it up in outline form. So it really is Bible study form. It's, again, wooden translation, but he breaks it up. And by the way, it gives an asterisk where a word is only used once in the translation or in the original languages. I kind of like that because I know some words which are hard words to interpret because they're only used once in the New Testament. And again, he uses asterisks to do that. So I do like that. But it is broken up in this paragraph or outline form. Still use red letters. Just to go all the way back to Revelation to show you the red letter in it. Standardized Study Bible, used for small groups. The goal is for you to buy the translation, use it with a group. You have an outline, so it's easy to exposit, I guess. Page numbers are on the bottom, as you can see. Got to pull this way back. All right, so here's the thing. I started to do some research on the internet about this Larry D. Harper fellow. By the way, this is kind of it's not a leather, but it's a vinyl, I guess they call it. Anyway, and you can find more information about him. He's still alive, and again, this translation is very recent. He's working on the Old Testament, and you can go to voiceofelijah.org to see not only about this Bible and about his work in Old Testament, but also newsletters he does and other avenues. It doesn't look like he has a church, mostly just does research, what he calls the Elijah Project, in which he basically shows how the prophets foretell the ministry of Christ. But then when you read it, it goes into kind of odd theology. He argues, for instance, I think his basic contention is for what he calls the teaching, okay? The teaching. Wrote down my notes here, the teaching. And what he basically argues is that we are living in the sixth day of creation. So there are two Adams, one which was made on the third day, which was made out of dust, prepubescent humans who sinned, sent to planet Earth to live their life on the sixth day, and that the second Adam, Jesus, will come to remake us into his image on the seventh day of creation. And what he does is he argues that anyone who thinks differently than that, because he has a special knowledge, which he calls the way, anyone who would argue against that doesn't know the truth, as the first paragraph mentioned, And he calls other people who don't go along with his theology fools, dullards, people who have had a lobotomy. He talked about living in the hellhole in which we live nowadays. And he calls people fools and people without brains. And to me, that looks like a clear violation of Matthew 5:22 and 23. But nevertheless, one of the things that really makes me uncomfortable about that is that I don't like when people call other people names. And what it does, it sets up, as Paul writes, knowledge puffs up. What it sets up is an us versus them kind of mentality. So if you say, okay, I'm going to translate the languages, I have this secret knowledge, you don't just get somebody who's teaching something and offers an interpretive lens. You get what I would argue is a cult leader, because anybody who says I have special knowledge and they don't, therefore I have the superior reading and the only true reading and everyone else is false or going to hell, or people, so-called biblical researchers who write like they've had a lobotomy, or dullards, you got an issue. If you read his work, if you're like me, you'll get lost in it. It doesn't make sense. It's a meandering kind of mess of esoteric use of scripture to make points that are so far out that you can't make heads or tails of it. So that is my odd Bible for you today. Comment, chime in below, let me know what you think. Thank you so much for joining me. It's a cat!